Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everybody from across the interwebs. We are back, kind of back. It's almost like a rebirth. It's a new style of SKALE School. Obviously, those of you who've tuned in before know we like to go through interesting topics related to Scale, related to the blockchain industry as a whole, and kind of just prove why Scale's the best at doing it and teaching you guys how to do it yourselves or why you should be so excited. This time, in this rebirth, we're going to be focusing a lot more on kind of the information, having a fun time doing it, and communicating with you guys who are viewing it. And if you guys have any questions, I'm sure the Green Arrow would be happy to answer it. So, before we kick things off, you look like Steve ML. We've gone through this many times. Before we kick things off, let's do a quick round of intros. I am your host, Falcor, head of community over here at Scale Network. And I am the person that knows pretty much nothing, as I'm mostly gaming related. No idea how I got the job, but we are here where we are. And co-host / teacher, Mr. Great Axios Sawyer. Hello, my friend.
Hey, that is Mr. The Great Axios to you. Although I think I'm gonna have to go. I think I'm gonna have to go change my my Twitter handle to the Green Arrow. Although I don't know if DC will be too happy with that, but
no, it's just the Great Arrow.
The Great Arrow. I like it. I like it. I like it. Yeah. For real quick, for those of you that have not heard me speak before or haven't met me, my name's Sawyer. You'll see me also as the Great Axios. I run Scale Developer Success Team and I'm one of the lead community developers. And my job here today and in general is to help educate everyone, developers, builders, SKL token holders, stakers, and just general blockchain enthusiasts about what we can do, with Scale, how we contribute to the open, blockchain industry, and excited to be joined here today by some amazing individuals from the Corbett's team. So I'll hand it over to you, Alexander.
Hey guys, I'm Alexander Guy. I am I would say the lead engineer at Corbett's. I'm the CTO of our kind of mothership, and I run the Fairmeter project. We're all focused on getting agentic payments, getting crypto payments exposed to Web 2 endpoints. So all at x402 all the time.
And Sawyer, that answers your question from earlier of how to pronounce Fairmeter.
That is true. I was very concerned that I was going to butcher it. I still might. If I do, it's not on purpose, I promise.
But x402 is a very, very interesting topic. We've been discussing it kind of from a social perspective, internally, externally, kind of everywhere. It's been a very, very exciting kind of new phenomenon that is jumping across the tech sphere. It's interesting actually though, because I was searching on Twitter yesterday. They have this little feature called Radar, which allows you to see how many times something's been spoken about. And x402 over the past 30 days has only had 24,000 tweets, which is very little. And that kind of just proves how early we are to this technology and how early we are kind of to this potential new payment method, to this new phenomenon for whether it's agentic payments, machine to machine, or even the kind of use cases as well of traditional users. Maybe instead of having to go and do a subscription, how many times you load up that web page on like the Wall Street Journal or something, and you see this paywall, subscribe, and it's for whatever $1 a month. I'm like, I don't want to. I just let me read the article, and maybe I can go pay 10 cents and I can read, or 1 cent and I can read the article. And these are the type of things that were impossible prior to x402, and now we're gonna be really, really exploring it. So I'm excited to dive deep into how this is going to affect not only the kind of global landscape, but the thing that's more important for me, which is closer to my heart, on how it can affect Scale and why it is super important for Scale. And for those of you who are jumping in now, slowly but surely getting up there, views are increasing. Make sure you guys are following Corbits. It's at Corbits_dev, I believe.
Yep.
The Great Axios. You don't have to follow me, it's okay. But make sure you stay around to learn some cool things. So let's kick things off. What is X402?
I'm actually gonna. Yeah, you're taking this one. Perfect. No, you're taking it. I was gonna say this is all you. Go.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, X402 is an implementation of how to handle payments using the 402 HTTP response. So you guys are probably used to 404s and 200s and 503s and 500s, and you know all these codes. 402 was in the spec originally. It didn't have any use because nobody had really built a payment system around it. There had been experiments. Over the years, I'd seen a couple implementations that kind of like used it for something, but it was never something standard. Coinbase released a spec. I wouldn't call it a standard so much. It's more of a kind of white paper on potential use cases for 402. And they dubbed it X402, and then they proceeded to write up a kind of more complicated spec and put out an implementation. And fundamentally what it is, it's a really straightforward way, a really straightforward mechanic to get crypto payments routed through Web 2 infra. And I can dive into specifics of what that means. But the idea kind of and this is a really great thing that Coinbase did, is they basically said, we've got a bunch of customers that run servers that want to get paid. They don't know anything about crypto. We don't want them to know anything about crypto beyond, just getting paid through it. So let's build a design that puts almost none of the crypto intelligence, or actually hardly any, into the actual middleware that sits between the, what they call the client and the facilitator. And so anybody can be onboarded quickly, just describing their payment term, describing their wallet, describing their network, and then they don't have to run any infra that's crypto related. So all their RPC work is done at the facilitator and sometimes at the client. All the landing is done, at a combination of client and the facilitator. And the middleware, the third party, doesn't have to deal with any of this. So it's really similar to, kind of legacy systems where you had, a restaurant doesn't know anything about credit card networks. They've got a payment terminal, they route, they put numbers in, they get paid. This is a distributed kind of decentralized crypto-based model that works with similar paradigms, but in internet native, crypto native way.
I love it. And from the research that I've gone through, normally the 402 response was majoritarily used for API, right? You run out of API bandwidth.
It can be, yeah, that could be a possibility. The issue is that it's really, really hard to tell the client what to do in an automated way with that response, right?
Yeah.
There wasn't any infrastructure where you could say, oh, shoot, I've run out of infra or run out of payment to use this infra. What do I do? And with X402, there's actually a very automated way to react to the requirement that you have to pay. There are a couple implementations of it now. Obviously, Coinbase has their reference implementation. Fairmeter, we did a clean room implementation based on the spec. It's a complete alternative stack, which is our model of implementing that, our architecture, the way that we thought we should do it. And I'm sure there'll be others, but now there's actually a couple of ways you can just boot up, run some code, import some libraries, and you're off to the races, which is a big change to the old way, which was, it was completely proprietary. You got back a status code and what do you do? So.
Yeah. I think just tacking onto that for those listening that aren't familiar. By the way, that was a fantastic introduction. I think every time I describe things, I describe them different. That was very, very, very clean. So appreciate that. For those of you listening that are maybe not developers, or you're maybe you haven't done a lot with web-based development or back-end development or anything that might be a little bit closer to how the web actually works or the internet works. HTTP status codes are what the servers respond or send back as part of the response to a request. So this is an internet standard, right? It is standardized across all essentially web services, browsers, the HTTP protocol, right? So similar to how X402 is now a open protocol, HTTP is functionally an open protocol that's been adopted across pretty much the entire world and across everything. And you have all these levels of status codes, right? As Alexander mentioned, you have, the 200 level status codes, 200, 201, 202, which generally mean, hey, you're good, right? Or something was created, you're all good. Then you have your 400s, which are generally, hey, it didn't fail, but there's something wrong, right? And we can fix what's wrong, but here's information on how to fix it. And then you have your 500 level, which is actually like, hey, something went wrong at the server. We're probably not going to tell you what it is for security purposes, but like, try again later. And so the important part about why I think X402 is so important to driving adoption forward for not just crypto, blockchain, stablecoins, but actually for making it easier for developers to adopt monetization is because it works within the existing web infrastructure, right? You don't have to go out of your way to add this, like Alexander mentioned. It's just adding some middleware, and then you can use one of these kind of open facilitators. You can use any blockchain. You can use multiple blockchains and many stablecoins, many tokens. And then, behind the scenes, you no longer have to worry about spinning up, a Stripe account. You no longer have to worry about, adding in all of this like legacy infrastructure that, yeah, it's really great if you want to accept, credit cards and debit cards. But the reality is for a lot of situations and even a lot of people and businesses, it's limiting infrastructure, right? It's why we kind of consider it legacy. It's why we also see companies like Stripe building their own blockchains and adopting blockchain, right? They clearly see something and are pushing toward it. So I'll pause there, but yeah, back to you, Falcor.
Yeah, I think it's it opens up, a multitude of different opportunities, and I guess kind of the question really comes to why is this not possible? Why is the current infrastructure, payment methods, and processes unable to capitalize and utilize this kind of method of payment?
It's a broad question. It's a broad question.
Yeah.
I think I think there's two ways to look at it, and I think I'll probably stick more to the technical part here. There is, I think, pieces on like compliance and legality that ultimately we are going to have to address at some point. It's too early to address them now. These types of things require more adoption and growth, but there is a lot around, if you are familiar with the payments space and the finance space, there's a lot around money transfer licenses, travel rules. There's all this different stuff that, different countries require at different levels, different government agencies. And I do think we're going to get to a point where there's going to be people building, within X402 that has those compliance features, but it's going to be baked in, just like when you utilize something like a Stripe or, a Square or a proof of sale, point of sale service. But I think we're still very early, right? We're in like the very beginning of this. And so I don't think that's the place where it makes sense to start. I think the place where it makes sense to start is, who was this designed for? And then what did we figure out it could also be used for? And I think at the very high level, and then I'll hand it over to Alexander to kind of dive deeper. This was originally designed, if you read all the specifications in the white papers, this was actually designed for agentic payments, right? It's no secret that AI has functionally kind of taken over our society, right? We've seen this shift over the last 2 years where it went from AI didn't really work to everybody picks up ChatGPT to do everything, right? Like first thing you open on your browser is ChatGPT. You don't go to Google anymore, you go to ChatGPT. You might use Google, but we go to AI, right? And that's normal now, and that's okay. But the problem is it consumes a lot of resources behind the scenes, and we didn't yet have a way to figure out how to properly consume and monetize resources. And so X402 sets us on that path of somebody can create a tool, right? Google can have a Google search MCP server, which we can talk more about later. And they can say, hey, ChatGPT, if you want to use Google, we're going to charge you, a penny per Google search, right? And now Google has a way to monetize all this compute that they're providing back to these AI agents, to these prompt-based servers. And then I think moving forward, I don't think it's super prevalent, but I think we're starting to see people talk about the impact it can have on humans, right? Ben, you mentioned at the beginning, what happens if I want to go read an article on Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or New York Times, and it pops up, hey, subscribe to read this. I have never in my life once subscribed to read that, but I can pretty much promise you that if they enabled X402 and let me pay a few cents to read that article, they will make more money on me as a consumer. I don't know if they'll make more money overall, but they will get my money because I'm willing to pay a few cents. I don't want to subscribe to something I need for one time. And so I think we're also starting to see that like comprehension of, hey, it's not just for agents. Yes, it's going to be amazing for agents, but there's actually also human value to where X402 is going. But I'm going to pause there. I have a feeling that Alexander's got some maybe even more deeper thoughts on maybe either or both of those.
Yeah, well, everything you said makes sense, and I totally agree with. One thing that I'm noticing, we'll talk about Fairmeter in a minute, but one thing that I'm noticing is this gap between wallets and being able to make payments. The integration's a little bit too much for a lot of normal sites, right? Sites that are used to having subscription-based access, or needing some type of like account and all that type of thing. It's rare that you see kind of a normal Web 2 site that's just like wallet enabled, like you said. I just want to pay for an article or a read or whatever. What I'm noticing is that because the LLM usage has gotten so high, because things like MCP and tools are starting to get more and more used, there is more of this need to be able to have your agents reach out and buy things, right? Because people are going to start limiting what the agents are allowed to do. So it's kind of this interesting feedback that's happening. Like a really good example of this is Cloudflare with pushing their 402 and basically stopping agents from being able to just scrape things arbitrarily. It's the increase in agent usage is forcing the Web 2 space to start actually coming up with answers to this, which happen to be the payment strategy that can be used by agents. So you get this really interesting flywheel that's going to start kicking off, where people are going to be almost forced to do it, because you are going to want to be able to do metered and request-based payments just to deal with the load of these LLMs and these people that are doing these model creation, accessing your site, getting your data, and you're going to need to monetize it somehow. So it's kind of interesting. I wouldn't call it ironic, but it's an interesting like feedback loop that's just kind of being forced to happen. And one thing that I like about the X402 space and the pace that it's moving at is it's feeling like critical mass is kicking off. We are super early. There isn't a ton of discussion about it yet outside of the people in the know that are super excited about it. But it's one of those things where I believe we're going to very quickly get to a point where it's going to be so obvious that when you explain it to people, they're like, what's interesting about that? It's obvious, right? Like those are some of the best ideas and the best additions to kind of the world around us. And I think we're kind of really well set up to enjoy that kind of transition happening, where the crypto space and more typical Web 2 users start just merging more and more over using these standards. So
definitely. No, I definitely agree there. I think it's kind of like that. I think for a while, people have kind of thought that like cryptocurrency is blockchain's PMF, right? Like the perfect product market fit. And I've always been a big believer that it's not, just because I don't like, I think there's incredibly high value in tokenization, in RWAs, in stable coins, in like strong protocol level tokens. But I've personally never been like, I don't love like the meme coin craze. I don't love all that, because I don't think the average human being has time or cares about it. I think it's more of you get your gamblers, your degenerates, right? And that's okay. The world has plenty of room for them, and we can build things for them too. But I agree from a more day-to-day standpoint. I think the opportunity here is just going to continue to kind of snowball and accelerate so quickly, because I don't want to butcher this. I won't butcher the phrase, but I always forget the history. But there's the phrase of like, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And I think, you kind of get like, I think people forget, because we've been in this like cloud era for the last, 15, 20 years, right? Where 10, 15, 20 years, where everything's kind of been free because they've monetized off our data. But now we're like 10 years ago, we didn't sit on our phones 24/7. Now everyone's on their phones, their computers, their TVs, their smart devices all day. We're just using the internet so much. And the reality is the companies who control the internet realize, hey, they can not only monetize, but they need to monetize because it costs so much money to support this infrastructure. And I think all that being said, to kind of wrap up and support what you're saying, of they can't figure out how to scale that up without this, because they've been searching, and obviously Cloudflare, who runs like 25% of the internet's bandwidth, said, hey, we think this is the solution. And so now I think the next logical step for people that is going to be very clear is, where do they actually run this, right? I think it's going to become very clear, and this is going to be probably my biggest scale shill of the day. You can't run this on blockchain with gas fees. They can't do this in places where compute works, because it's like hey, we're going to pay for this premium for resource. No, people like Cloudflare, people that are actually running the internet, they need incredibly low cost, incredibly efficient, instant finality, no fees. They just need prepaid compute that allows them to functionally, well, handle the billing and the metering for the entire agentic world, which is in its infancy, right? And I think as we can all kind of agree, it's probably just going to get bigger and bigger. And so it's a question of where are they going to run all this? And I think again, that's kind of my scale show of the day is they're probably going to need a lot of scale chains because you can't run this on L2s with gas fees. It's just not really feasible for you in the long term. So
imagine trying to run it on an L1.
Probably not going to work. But the nice part is, and maybe this is a good transition over into our Corbits conversation. As of last night-ish Pacific time, we officially have support for Farameter on Scale, right? So I think maybe now's a good time. What do you think, Ben, to kind of pivot over there and do a deep dive into the protocol and how we're working together?
Let's do it. But before we do that, Farameter, is that the one that measures earthquakes?
No, Farameter is actually, it's mostly used in India as a taxi cab meter. That's the word that they use over there.
Oh,
Farameter is a if you're driving around, you need a fare meter. They actually sell them under the name fare meter. It's a known term, mainly in India. Yeah,
I think you're thinking of a seismograph.
Oh shit! Yeah, that's not so close.
Yeah, because if we're looking at it more literally, it's kind of right in front of us, huh? Like fare meter, like literally, like you pay a fare for a taxi. Yeah,
yeah, that's absolutely it.
Yeah,
you hit it right in the name, and we're just totally overthinking this.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I found it. I was like, oh, this is actually available. This is a great name for this. Like, let's snag this right away.
So before we dive into anything else, I have to ask because I think it's always fun to ask other developers how long did you search for a name? Because when I'm trying to name a new product or service, I feel like I spend longer trying to find the name and the domain than actually building the product.
Yeah, it's an issue. I mean, the two hardest things in computer science are naming things and cache invalidation. That's a famous kind of set of statements, and I fully believe it. So I think Farameter took probably a day for me to figure out what it was going to be called.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
Next time I have an idea, I'm calling you, and you can help me name it.
Yeah, no, we'll spitball it. It'll be good.
Awesome.
So, what is Corbits, and kind of what are you guys doing? How are you aiming to benefit the x402 space, and who are you?
Yeah, for sure. So Corbits is kind of a brainchild built by the guys at ABK Labs, headed by Pontus, who you guys have talked to. What it is basically is we're trying to enable x402 by rubber meets the road, bringing APIs online. So one of the issues with all these standards is people go, oh, well, I've got a spec, I got a standard. What do I do with it? And that's been asked so many times by people on calls. Just discussing this, meetings with people about the standard because it's super exciting, but how do you make it useful for people? And so Corbits exists to make that happen. And so what we've been doing is we've been working with our partners. We've been working internally. We've been working kind of with a good group of people to add 402 to APIs. So we brought Triton for Solana RPC online. Helios is online. We've got a couple things in the coming down the pike that we're going to be announcing soon. We've got a bunch of docs on how to use them under the hood with 402. So if you want to make Solana RPC calls, you, for instance, don't need to now subscribe to monthly fees and set up the info and all that. You can pay as you go, make an RPC request. These are kind of some of the beginning pieces of what Corbits is doing to kind of enable the ecosystem and to get people to fired up and using this infrastructure. And as we go along, we'll be rolling out more and more APIs that you can directly use publicly as 402 consumer. We'll be supporting as many chains as we have interest in as far as payment. Just kind of putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak, on how much we believe 402 is the future. In kind of making this happen.
Love it. And what is your team? So obviously, you guys are building towards, almost adding in these kind of train tracks that are going to be able to enable easier, integration and usage. And I guess it would be great to know, like, as for your team, right? Like how big you guys are, like how excited you are, how like ready are you to jump in onto this new phenomenon?
Yeah, we're a closely knit group of people. I mean, obviously we love open source, kind of open source first. One of the co-founders wrote a shell you guys might use called Bash. He was kind of the first employee of the Free Software Foundation, helped write the GPL. So we're open source guys like through and through. That's our thing. Alex Kahaya, our other co-founder, we've been doing open source as kind of our day jobs for quite a while. We have, I think right now we're about 7 people. We are completely all in on x402. We support some other projects, like we support and built out some tooling called SVM Kit, which is kind of a side topic, but lets you build Solana chains kind of as infrastructure as code. We support that. That's kind of another one of our babies, but Fairmeter and Corbits is our primary interest.
Incredible. And sorry, you've been working with them, like.
Yeah, we've it kind of came, I would say, out of left field. And for some context on why, and I think this really calls out the background of the team, at ABK Labs and Corbits and what they're doing. When we kind of sat down and wanted to start working through x402 and figuring out how we could get support on scale and help contribute, the first thing I kind of realized, and this is not a shot at anybody because they've built this so fast and there's so many contributors, the Coinbase x402 GitHub is kind of chaos right now. There's like so many things mixed in, and there's not a ton of guidance on like how they want you to come in and propose different changes. They're just kind of like, it's just so early, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but we wanted to figure out how to kind of expedite support on scale ASAP, because we had a ton of teams building out agents and building out MCPs and things like that. And so I kind of went around and started doing some research, and just by chance, Twitter's apparently a great place to find people these days. Just started reaching out to people and commenting, and came across Corbits and said, "Hey, can we connect? I'd love to add support." And then here we are, like a week and a half later, and we've got support on scale. We've made some open source contributions, which I'm happy to talk more about. But I think it just speaks to, like, it only took me, I think, I want to say like around 8 hours, like start to finish, to actually make the additions for scale. And the majority of that was me actually reading like the x402 spec, MCP spec, EIP 3009 spec. Like the majority of it was actually me reading other things. Once I sat down to actually make the changes, it was really easy, just because the way they've designed Fairmeter is so kind of clean and very easy to add those extensions to. And so I think that speaks volumes about how different teams are going to choose adoption. I personally am a big fan of not just open source, but just lean, right? Like I think it's always easy, especially with like the TypeScript landscape right now and how many vulnerabilities there are, and all the NPM hijacking. The less you have going on, it's kind of just easier for, I think, not just a solo dev to pick up, an indie dev, but I think also enterprises, right, who are going to start coming and looking. They have their own set of compliance and security and all that they have to go through, and I think just kind of less is more there. So yeah, very, very excited to make those contributions. And yeah, we officially have x402 on scale, and we're going to be adding more chains. And yeah, excited to continue to work together with the team and see what else we can push forward.
Yeah, we're excited too. You actually have landed the first external PR into the project outside the company, so for what that's worth, yeah,
yes, I
appreciate it. Yeah, because it's interesting, right? So I don't know, how technical do you guys want to go into the actual Fairmeter side of things? Like, what level do you want to go to? You want to stay 30,000 feet, or you want to dive into the
Let's start diving a little bit deeper, and if it gets too crazy, we'll let Ben interrupt, and I'll come in and try to syntactic sugar it up for the crowd.
Perfect. Yeah, I like it. Well, let's start at a philosophical level, right? Because you kind of hit the nail on the head with getting code into the reference implementation. And that's kind of how I describe it now is Coinbase's reference implementation. They built it quickly. They built it for a specific task. I had the benefit to be able to kind of look at that and step up a little bit, zoom out a little bit and go, what do I really want to do with this, right? I have a very strong feeling that X402 is not going to be the last 402 standard out there. I think that it's going to grow over time. I think it's going to be extended. I think the second that it becomes mainstream and W3C or someone gets hold of something related, there are going to be changes. And so my mindset has been, how do we, in the most agnostic and compatible way possible, stitch together as many different payment methodologies into a set of, like you said, really lean libraries that let you tilt things up quickly, get what you need out of them. They're very easy to extend. You're not like locked into the way that we do things. And then you can kind of just really hit the ground running quickly. But also when you need to do something difficult or different, you can, and doesn't prohibit you, right? So from that's been kind of my philosophy about that. And that's kind of my philosophy about software in general is I love having tools that are loosely coupled. This is why I like Unix and Linux so much, and just that kind of mentality. You build some tools that are loosely coupled that work to, do a job well, but work with other tools well. And then you can kind of see what gets built out of that rather than locking things in. So an actual, really, for me, an important metric is how long it took for you to get Scale working. I want to make that number go as low as possible over time, right? I want to make it less complicated, add new features to the tooling without it becoming a bloated mess, right? If you look at what it took to get Solana into the Coinbase reference standard, last I checked, it was about an 11,000 line diff with churn and all the required bits. For us to implement the exact same functionality inside Parameter, I just checked, it's 594 lines, including tests. So the orders of magnitude difference for you to add a new payment methodology or add a new chain to Parameter is a really important metric for me, tracking the way that our tooling's built and how people are able to use it. Which maybe sounds a little strange, but for me, that's a really good signal that the stuff we've written works and it's put together well.
Definitely. Yeah. If I may step in quickly, I think this is a huge props to your team, right? I think the majority of time that I actually spent messing with your guys' code base was the EIP 3009 forwarding. And so just for context for everyone, and the reason why this is probably important for the broader X402 adoption, and the reason I'm so proud that Scale's contributing to this, or at least myself on Scale's behalf, is right now, X402 was primarily designed to work with a very specific subset of tokens which support this Ethereum improvement proposal / ERC, which is called 3009, which is basically transfer with authorization. If you're familiar with, you click MetaMask and it says, hey, sign this message, that's pretty much the majority of the bones behind the scenes. And then it's doing a couple other things to allow you to basically sign a message, and then the facilitator can pay the gas fee to push it on chain for you. Now, the problem with this is most tokens are not upgradable, but the ones that are generally growing in adoption and especially supported by Coinbase are going to be, your USDC, your ERC or Euro from Circle, as well as a couple others like AUSD from Agora. And there's a few others kind of scattered here and there. But that's why if you're paying any attention to X402, you'll see that the majority of payments right now are occurring in USDC across all chains. And that's because Circle is one of the only stable coins to actually use this ERC 3009 directly within their token. And so I sat down and said, well, that's great, but Scale USDC and USDT and all these other assets are not 3009 compliant. And I still want to use X402, especially when you consider, if you look at the broader world, outside of the United States, the majority of payments and asset ownership in stablecoins is leaning heavily toward the Tether version of USDC still, or USD, which is USDT. And so what's so important about EIP 3009 is it allows us to maintain compatibility with the existing facilitator standards, but we have to add something kind of in the middle to actually allow that. And so that's where this forwarding comes in. It's essentially a smart contract that is coupled specifically with a single token for security purposes. It's not like this broad, you can use it for anything. And I did that on purpose to ensure that it was less confusing for, if you see that pop up in your wallet, you don't see the same address for 10,000 tokens. You want like almost one per token, like a token. And what this now allows for is any token on any EVM chain to be used with a facilitator. And so that's actually where I spent the majority of time in your guys' code base, was adding that in a way where I didn't have to touch any of your core facilitator logic, because that was the goal of what I wanted to accomplish. Was I didn't want the facilitator to have to conform to EIP 3009 forwarding. I wanted EIP 3009 forwarding to conform to the facilitator, which means any facilitator can now adopt it, which helps push the vision forward. And now as this picks up, if we have, countries and teams that are, they prefer USDT on, Scale Europa, they prefer USDT on Tron, they prefer PayPal USD on Arbitrum, whatever it may be, they now have the opportunity to use any token anywhere to kind of drive the adoption of the standard forward. And they don't have to be, subject to, we can only use Circle issued assets, or, the few others here and there that are 3009 compliant. So just want to call that out, because I think if we didn't do that, it probably would have taken me less than 30 seconds to add support for Scale, because it was just adding a network and a token. But it was actually the kind of like ternary operators throughout the if forwarder that we needed to ensure was working properly, as well as the modifications to the domain signature. But I digress.
Yeah, no, and it's going to be good. There's a bunch of stuff that I want to kind of start extending in that. It's going to be great to work with you on that, talk through it, and kind of share things so we get on the, get the best minds behind it. But,
well, you're in the wrong place then. He yaps a lot, he talks a lot, but if you actually listen to what he says, most of the time, it don't make sense.
Yeah. Well, you just got to know what you're listening to.
Ouch.
No, bro, you were yapping to me all last night, bro. I was trying to go to sleep, and you're here pinging me 19 different things. It's just ping, ping, ping. You woke my wife up at 2 a.m.
Why did you not mute your Discord?
In case because something important might be happening.
But how do you differentiate between something important and not? Exactly.
Hence why it's not muted.
This seems like a flaw in your process, not mine.
So what, we've talked about what x402 is. We've spoken about, what Corbits are, how Corbits is helping kind of push the needle. Let's take a look at the future of x402, right? Yeah. What is, let's say, perfect world, everything keeps going the way that it's going. 10 years time, what does x402 look like?
That's a good question. Actually, it's a perfect segue. So something that I think is interesting right now is we are seeing this USDC being the main driver on x402. So much so that I just double checked because I didn't want to talk out of turn. You still can't support more than one token type on a given network and scheme with the Coinbase reference x402 implementation. They didn't include enough data in the standard in order for you to differentiate the payment requirements, for you to know which token is being paid with without doing a deep dive into the internals of the actual thing that the client sent. Which
so if it cost 100, let's just say they had it listed at 100 USDC, but I sent them 100 Meepo token, which is worth nothing, it would still go through?
Wouldn't go through. It would just, the facilitator doesn't know how to differentiate which payment requirements. The way to think of it is this. If someone said they had an order, they paid for it, right? The number, you know the number, but you don't know which token it applies to, right? And so therefore you can't with proper information even verify the payment itself, because you don't know the information, the metadata around the payment, right? And this is a bug that we fixed in Fairmeter because I ran into it. It was one of those moments where I noticed the bugs, I ran into it in the facilitator, and then I went back and looked at the code in the middleware that caused it. And I had written a comment when I actually wrote the middleware code saying, this seems really broken. I don't think the standard includes enough information to properly figure out which requirements to use. And I was like, I knew there was a bug here. So I went and looked at the Coinbase code, and sure enough, it's broken there too. And there's a ticket that's been up since May, but since USDC is the only thing that matters, it's up since May, and that's it. So the reason I'm bringing this up is we're at an interesting inflection point, right? Where this standard is being driven by very interested parties in specific use cases. The next 10 years, I think it's going to be brought out and be more decentralized. It's going to be supporting more use cases. It's going to be less focused on just moving stable coins across, Base, which is where it's kind of focused right now, and Solana. And I think I believe that some variation of this is going to be integrated deeply into future HTTP standards and W3C standards work. Going back to the use cases you guys both spoke about, how to make it so, even your normal web browser can go and pay things properly. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be only crypto, because there's nothing in the standards that requires the chain be specifically this or specifically that the token be specifically this or specifically that. The real work is between the client, which could be the browser, and the facilitator, which can be anyone that the middleware chooses to use. So it's a very flexible way to approach this. And I'm excited about seeing it become just normal. Like I said earlier, just an obvious answer that the fact you even have to say it now is just, you're just saying something that was already known to almost everyone.
I fully agree with that. And I think that's kind of why, I think that's why we're so excited to contribute, is because ultimately it's fantastic to have, Coinbase and Cloudflare and Circle all kind of be a part of this, because it does drive validity to what we're attempting. But I think to your point, it gets tricky because ultimately they are all for-profit businesses. Now they are spinning out the, X402 Foundation, which I think will be I think that'll probably be a substantial step in the right direction for what we're all attempting, because it kind of takes some of the pressure off of the businesses to, make money and kind of help with adoption. But I think that is kind of a key point around, where are we going and how do we get there? And I do think it's really just going to take time to see what people can innovate, right? I agree with this idea that, not everything has to be an existing stablecoin. But I do think that we will probably continue to see, I think, people utilize blockchain and tokenization, even if it's not an actual stablecoin with value. So what I mean by that is something that I've actually talked with a lot of people about, and I think is a really interesting concept. A lot of companies, for compliance reasons, they can't have tokens, right? Just for whatever reason, they may not be able to support something that is public, open, whatever. I think a good example is, look at Apple, for example, right? All hypothetical, but they have all their own payment rails. They could easily allow people to buy, Apple credits or Apple USD that goes on their set of private blockchains and utilize X402 with all of the existing code to now unlock all this pay-per-use resource. The difference is their Apple USD or their Apple credit would all be privatized within their network, because that's the type of company they are, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so I think a big piece of X402 adoption is going to come when, right now there's a lot of, you see this with every kind of sub industry that pops up in blockchain. Right now you've got teams that are launching tokens around X402. And I just don't think that's the right direction. I think the reality is the teams that are going to drive the adoption the most are going to be teams building the open source components and then working with real businesses, real enterprises, POS systems, stuff like that. And we're just going to slowly see this snowball effect. And then in, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I think this is going to be, to your point, you said it almost at the beginning of this stream, it's going to be something that's just normal, kind of like how HTTP is normal, or WebSocket's normal now. And you have all these things that they're just over time, they become normal. I think that's where we'll kind of see some form of X402 or 402 based standard where it's just normal, right? Devs use it as their default. And instead of going to Stripe needs to conform to 402. Instead of going to Polar, you're using X402, you're using 402, and everyone's conforming to that standard. And money moves much faster, much easier. And developers get to win for the first time in a while when it comes to payments, instead of being bashed around trying to find the thing that works.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to say it. I was just thinking, this will date me, But when we were first tilting up infrastructure, when I worked for first startups, we had to buy SSL stacks from people. Like there was no free SSL. You literally had to pay for an implementation of SSL and patch your local copy of Apache. And even Apache was amazing because it was the first free like HTTP server you could just get your hands on and start hacking. Right? So we take it for granted now. It's like, well, now it's obvious. It's everywhere. Nobody would ever think they'd have to buy. I mean, if I had Nginx in 1994, I would have been the happiest person on the planet, right? And so what happens with this stuff over time is it just shifts and it progresses. And I think I just see x402 and the 402 standard specifically just becoming that. I just think I think it's a foregone conclusion.
Definitely. And I think, a question for you, Benjamin, as you think about, I guess like a question and a statement, right? I think there's two sides to the x402 world, right? I think the first is the actual core payment piece, which functionally we've now made happen, right? Like it works. The next step is driving that adoption. But I think, as we look at these like two lanes, right, that I think will probably drive forward in parallel. I think we'll see the agentic side accelerate first. I think we're going to see the human side lag, and then one day just probably skyrocket forward and blow past the agentic side. I think, a good question for Ben here, as he's not as technical, and that is A-okay. Where do you see this being the biggest impact on your life? Do you think it's that, I no longer have to subscribe to everything? Is it, you get more agentic stuff cheaper? Where do you see this like high level concept of internet native payments benefiting you the most?
This is going to be a very, very rogue answer. You ready for it? Utility payments.
Totally valid.
Internet, right? That's one. And I know there's like pay as you go type things, but I'm talking about like a real, as you use it type thing.
So can we just call out that is how that's going in a full circle for like something like internet? It's almost like, you remember like pay per text? I remember my first phone had, I was like, I got my first phone, I couldn't use it. I was told you can't use it. Costs too much money.
Or like kind of on the inverse, right? Like, and I know you would never be like, it would never work, but selling, like, let's say, so for example, I, for some reason, pay for, I think it's 560 gigabytes worth of mobile phone data a month, right? I don't leave my house. I don't use it at all, ever. But could I then find a way to go find a marketplace and then sell those gigabytes off and use the likes of x402? And then you have people that instead of going over to, the mobile phone companies getting into subscriptions and things like that, they're almost buying your data off of you. And I think that could be interesting. Or the other one that I think would be the most, and I've been thinking about this one a lot actually, is you need to build a wallet application, right? Because I think we spoke about it at the start, where kind of the biggest hurdle is going to be someone owning a wallet for this to work. And I think I said to you, Sawyer, the moment Google implements a wallet that's linked to email addresses and you can store crypto is the moment we've hit quote unquote mass adoption, right? I feel like when that happens, I sort of disagrees. I think it is, and then you can do all of this. It doesn't matter.
I think you have that already through all these providers. I actually think it's less about the wallet. I do think wallets are important, and I actually think wallets. I have a whole philosophy around wallets. I'm not even going to get into, but I actually think the more important part is how do you get funds invisibly into that wallet. And I think that's actually something why I also think like Coinbase is doing such an amazing job. If you haven't seen it, they recently announced this new feature where you can do like Apple Pay to USDC. So you literally like you can bake it into your application where it's like, $25 and it's like instantly debit to your crypto wallet. And it's just like it's invisible and clean, as opposed to historically you had to like sign up for a Coinbase account and like do all this stuff, right? And so I don't think you're wrong, Ben. I think it's you need the mass adoption wallet, like you need the Googles, the Apples, et cetera, to ultimately start supporting it. But then you also need, I think, like that payment flow in. I think that's where you actually start to hit like critical mass growth for users, because like Venmo, Cash App, these are all huge applications that have hundreds of millions of people using them, right? But like if you think about it, the on-ramp or the onboard for Venmo is terrible. It's like you have to KYC, you have to do all this identity stuff, you have to link your bank account through Plaid, which is like I cool company, great tech, but like I hate doing that. I don't need to give them my password. And then you still have to move the money into the account. And so functionally, we could do the exact same thing with stablecoins and blockchain, but we can actually make it like way faster and quicker, especially when we start to combine things like ZK proof identities. You no longer need to scan your face. You could just actually have a proof that you already pre-scanned. And like you start to combine all these things together. I know I'm rambling, but I think that's where you actually get to what you're asking for, is like mash all that together and you've got human adoption at a scale that I don't think anyone is actually even thinking about right now.
Please go get tested for ADHD. Bro took my ramble and then rambled more, like I said. So going back to the original question, kind of like a game, like Clash of Clans, right? You gotta go pay $10 for crystals or things like that. If you could build a gaming infrastructure that was focused on micropayments, mini games, and things like that, you could do so many things, not only for like kind of, pay for progression, but you could also do peer-to-peer wagering. You could do so many of these small different things, right? There where you go in, right? In my mind, I'm seeing, for some reason, Telegram, because everything's on Telegram, right? A little Telegram app bot where you go in, you put $10 in, and you have an astronomical number of like little games, mini games that you can play, and it costs a cent, half a cent, whatever per life, kind of like the arcade model. You could do peer-to-peer wagering, you could do leaderboards, you could do so many different things. I think like that people don't want to pay. Xbox Game Pass became so big and so amazing because it was $14 a month and you got everything. This is kind of the same idea, where if you were to throw in $10 a month into this gaming hub and got access to all of these games, which were then given, completely different model here. Okay, distribution, $10 in, and then the games were actually paid per minute, per second, per hour on game time, and you have royalty distribution. So it doesn't just go to everyone. It actually goes to the games that are being played. You don't have to go and buy a $20, a $40, $100 game, a $40 game. You can just go in, test it out for an hour. Oh, you didn't enjoy it? It's all good. It only costs you $1 worth of these payments.
I love that. And I actually have a question for Alexander based off that, which is, so something I've been thinking a lot about from a design perspective of something we could kind of point X402 towards is that concept of prepay, and then you have these micropayments, right? So right now we're under this like assumption of, I'm a user and I'm gonna like, reality is no human being is ever gonna want to like click a button every time they pay a penny, right? Like that's just not gonna happen. But what if the human being, right, paid in $10 to some smart contract, right? That was one signature, and they say, hey, prepay for this game hub, and then utilizing, like almost like a smart account, a background wallet, a custodian, whatever it's going to be, right? You now actually utilize the X402 to partition out that usage, whether it's streaming per second, per minute, per hour, like whatever it is. I'm curious if that does that ring a bell for you? Does that sound like something that actually makes sense? Or does that sound like we're actually going backwards?
No, it absolutely makes sense. Because let me give you a couple examples where we've had to really kind of think about how we want to handle the next stage. So, without getting too far into the weeds, fundamentally the way that X402 currently understands the different payment strategies is the network and the scheme, and then the asset. But network and scheme are the two parts that are required to really understand, like, how am I paying this, right? So network, scheme, and then asset, I'm going to be asked on base for $1 of USDC, and that's the exact amount, right? Like that's communicated to you as the client. That's X402 does that. That becomes a problem if you're doing something like gRPC streaming, or you're doing like LLM token generation, where you don't really know the exact price. You want to keep paying until you're done with it, right? And so we've been thinking a lot about that, about extending this, coming with a new scheme. Because we've been developing a couple experimental schemes on Solana already, just to experiment with settlement and a bunch of things related to off-chain payment. There was a huge number of different ways you could potentially use X402 to pay. Exact isn't necessarily going to be the use case that matches everything. So to be specific, streaming from some type of smart contract with a top-up scheme, with some type of way to, like, when you're done being used, be able to basically get back what hasn't been consumed, that's a no-brainer. I would love to have that implemented. And I think it's going to be easy to do it. Fairmeter specifically separates every single one of the payment schemes into its own client and facilitator kind of Oreo cookie, for lack of a better term. And it's trivial. You don't have to modify any of the rest of the infrastructure to add a new scheme. You just implement it, right? So you modified the EVM exact scheme to support forwarding. We could quite easily add an EVM streaming scheme, for lack of a better word. We could come up with a better scheme name, but that would let you do that. And it would still be compatible with everything. You don't have to modify the facilitator. You don't have to even modify the middleware or the client, as long as you can do what you want to do with fetch. So if it was gRPC streaming or streaming MPEG video data or audio or anything, you could come up with a top-up mechanism using a smart contract and using a micropayment extraction where you didn't have to just sit there and feed it, payment after payment after payment. It's all doable. And I think
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I think that's where I think that's where, like, the adoption really has an opportunity to take off, is when we start to find those use cases. Because I think, as with anything, your initial implementation is good for your POC, but then it's almost like how do we actually solve that problem, right? Like, if you're doing, Cloudflare pay per crawl, right? Do they actually need to do pay per crawl, or can they do, here, prepay me $5, $10, $100? Here's your budget. Almost like when you go on a cloud provider, right? You can set like your usage limits, your budget. Almost like, here, give me your budget, allocate some resources, and I'm just going to consume up to that. And so I think a lot of that will become very interesting and really help make it easier for, just normal developers who have no interest or care about blockchain to benefit from this. Especially as we start to combine different protocols, both on and off chain.
Well, this is a huge reason why you need to have an implementation that's modular. Because if you wanted to go get a streaming payment system into the Coinbase reference design, you'd be spending quite a lot of time. It would not be getting in and out quickly. Whereas if you and I sat down and designed a streaming scheme, we could have a prototype implemented and actually imported by other users if needed in days or less. It would be very, very easy to do. It doesn't require any of the modifications to Fairmeter at all, which was really important to me when we designed it. When I did the architecture.
Did you guys see that Sora 2 is now in API?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's actually
that is genuinely, you want to make some people out there, you want to make some money right now, set up an X402 payment system.
Daydream Systems.
Have they already done it? Sora API got announced yesterday. How are they already done?
Because they're so, like, I think this is where X402 is really interesting, is there's like these different layers of who's building what, right? So you have kind of at your lowest level, you have the blockchain, right? Then on that blockchain, you have your kind of contract layer, right? And that's going to be your stable coins, your tokens, and potentially your EIP 3009 forwarding. You might have like pay and swap contract. Like, you could do all these different things at the contract level. Then above that, you have your facilitators, right? And your facilitators are important because they're the glue between your merchants, your sellers, and the blockchain, right? They're like, they make it so everyone else doesn't have to actually know blockchain, basically. And then above that, you actually have your merchants and your sellers, and now, your merchants and your buyers. Your merchants are sellers, so buyers and sellers. The people who are selling right now are primarily agentic people. So if you actually look at who's built what in the X402 space, I would say 95% of the people are essentially reselling agentic compute. They're selling, like Pinata's selling access to storage via, X402. You've got, Daydreams, and you've got MC Pay, and you've got a bunch of others who are, basically reselling AI compute. Like that's what they're doing. And so that's why I think I said it like 15, 20 minutes ago. I think we're going to see this like agentic X402 is going to lead the way. And then we're going to see this like huge lag from like human value. And then one day we're going to have that like killer application that comes in, and all of a sudden people are going to be like, oh, this is amazing for humans for that reason. So there actually are people building it, but I think to your point, that is one of the massive opportunities, I think, for people to build right now. Like if you're a developer listening and you want to build something, go find an API, go find a website that has like an LLMs.txt file, make an MCP server, hook it up with X402, and you have a business, because like all that stuff is still so hard to access and attain, and people want to use it. And if you're not sure how that works with like privatized AI, go check out the Corbit's documentation. They actually have this really cool piece of functionality called like it's like a payment proxy that actually helps you let a client, a buyer who doesn't actually have access to a wallet or a stable coin, it lets them kind of forward via the proxy. So there's a way to make anything X402 today. And I think that is kind of like the TLDR of the conversation. This can be something that is baked into every corner of the internet, Sorry to steal your thunder, but yes, Sora 2.
I and I think like, and we got to wrap up in a minute. But like, with ChatGPT and OpenAI's like in-app, right? Their new kind of applications will be in chat now. I think you're going to see a balance update at some point in the near future, right? You'll have a little balance thing, and then if you want to go use Canva, which is normally a subscription-based platform, you can pay X, 5 cents for it to generate the images for you. Similarly with Figma, with all of these third parties. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't put their stuff on there for free if there wasn't a monetization procedure in the near future.
I agree. I think the biggest shock that I'll see is if I tried to create one yesterday, but I didn't have access to actually deploy the custom app, which was really, really frustrating. I built it, but I couldn't actually put it live.
No one.
No, they're in early previews, so apparently I'm just not an important enough developer, but that's okay. I think the biggest thing that will be interesting is to see whether there will be an open AI stablecoin, because arguably you can make the argument that is like, if we want to see adoption drive forward, if they add support for like example like Porto, if you've heard of like Porto EIP 7702 smart accounts, Porto, OpenAI stablecoin, chat USD, whatever you want to call it, in X402, this will be like anybody can now make money just by supplying data, which is I think would just be incredible. So if ChatGPT or anybody from OpenAI is listening, please give me a call. Happy to help implement.
Okay, will OpenAI launch a token by 2025? Poly market.
Token I'm not commenting on. I'm saying stablecoin.
That's the same thing in the eyes of poly market individuals.
We can agree to disagree. That's okay.
As I said, in the eyes of poly market people.
Fair enough.
3%. I remember I saw a circle one. I'm trying to find that. Poly market circle token. That's Circle IPO. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, I'm being stupid. Stripe. It was Stripe. I think it was 30%. So I think at the moment you have a better shot at Stripe launching a coin than OpenAI.
Well, Stripe's launching a blockchain, so. But that's beside the point. Okay, I know we're way over, and I rambled for like the last 20 minutes, so I apologize to everybody, including Alexander. My last question before we wrap up is for Alexander. In one sentence, what is your stance on where we're going to be in the next 6 months with X402? What is like the most important thing we should be thinking about or looking at or doing in one sentence?
I think discoverability is going to be a huge need across the ecosystem to find out which APIs you can pay for.
Okay, the Bazaar, right? Bazaar.
I think Bazaar is an idea. I think that there's plenty of room for whatever it ends up looking like, but it's going to be really, really important because if you want LLMs to be able to access and pay for things, they need to be able to find them. This comes part and parcel with things like data quality. How do you then decide, oh, this is a better source of this info than that one? There's going to be a ton of work in that space, I believe, and I think it's going to be very important to drive that.
Incredible way to end it. Amazing. Alexander, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure learning, about Corbits, more about X402. Sawyer. Yeah. So I'll see you.
Thank you, guys.
I'll see you later.
Thank you so much.
Guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Been a pleasure. Episode 1 of SKALE School. Join us this time next week for episode 2. Goodbye.